Born before the fall, Londriel survived the cataclysm entrapped in her relic, the Ark of Lamentation. She awakened to find a new world lost to chaos in need of a protector. She will become the savior she needs to be and rebuild all that was lost. Thanks for stopping by Big Top Gaming. My name's Brian, and today we're going to take a look at Londriel Spellwarden. So Londriel is a blue-white seeker that costs 10 echo to throw down. She has an accuracy of 4, a damage value of 5/3, a range of 8, speed of 6, defense of 14, and 16 wounds. For abilities, the first one we have is Spell Immunity. Whenever a spell would affect this unit, it may ignore that spell. We also have Riposte. Whenever a graze is scored against this unit, it may retaliate after the damage resolves. For Londriel's legacy, we have the Ark of Lamentation. She starts with 20 Echo like all the other dual color seekers, and it has 2 abilities. First one being Warding Insight. Whenever a spell you play prevents, cancels, or redirects an effect, look at the top card of your deck. Place it on the top or bottom of your deck. Then we have Ark's Vision. Whenever you look at one or more card from the top of your deck, you may reveal one of them. If it is a spell, draw that card. Otherwise, place it on top of your deck and gain 2 Echo. Londriel is a really interesting seeker to unpack. We kind of have these like preconceived blue-white notions that control is the name of the game, and I won't say that that's not her thing, but when we look at her actual stats, she's got a decent accuracy, a pretty high output on damage. She has a range band with her ranged attacks that's not nothing, and then she moves quite quickly and then has that defensive stat that's quite high. With Spell Immunity, the only way your opponent's going to be able to interact with Londriel is by attacking her, and by doing that, they're setting themselves up for these reposts, which then could also trigger some of her Ark of Lamentation stuff, depending on if you're preventing damage or not. So Londriel is really just a commanding piece to put into the center of the table and say, you know, I'm going to sit here and hold this relic and you have to come at me, and you can get punished quite heftily for coming into Londriel without some kind of really good action plan. So we'll shift our focus over to Londriel's legacy, the Ark of Lamentation. It states that she starts out with 20 Echo, as all other dual-colored seekers do, and has the ability Warding Insight that states whenever a spell you play prevents, cancels, or redirects an effect, look at the top card of your deck. Place it on the top or bottom of your deck. The second ability on Ark of Lamentation is Ark's Vision. Whenever you look at one or more cards from the top of your deck, you may reveal one of them. If it is a spell, draw that card. Otherwise, place it on top of your deck and gain 2 Echo. So the Ark of Lamentation is a bit more of a controversial legacy that's in Malediction, and I think it kind of exposes not so much the problems with Malediction's rule writing, but at least a gap in some of it, and it has a lot to do with triggers, and there are definitely people who are of two minds when it comes to understanding how this one functions. But if we look at Warding Insight, whenever you do the thing you're supposed to do, you look at the top card of your deck, there's a period there. And most of us in our gaming circles, we'll typically follow a trigger all the way through so it can resolve and then move on to the next trigger. But since Ark's Vision interrupts Warding Insight by saying, okay, you've looked at the top card of your deck, now you get to do the Ark's Vision thing where you can choose whether you want to reveal it and draw a card, or you could place it on the top of your deck and gain 2 Echo. So if you were to do something like, I'm going to go ahead and place it on top of my deck and gain 2 Echo, then you would go back to Warding Insight to finish out that trigger and then say, place it on the top or bottom of your deck. So as written right now, and the fact that Malediction doesn't address how triggers work when they're interrupted, we can only assume that the way that this functions is by saying that Warding Insight will get interrupted, then Ark's Vision can finish doing its thing, but then you get to finish out Warding Insight by placing that card on the top or bottom. And I think from there, it really makes Londriel's engine extremely interesting in that you can get spells if you want them, if you need them to start doing the things you need to do, if you want to keep triggering Warding Insight, or you can start gaining a lot of echo if you're seeing cards that you don't really want in your hand at that particular moment in time. So I think that it might take an FAQ to really understand the intention that Malediction's game writers or game designers and developers have behind this particular thing. So there's no official release on this or commentary on it yet, but from my perspective, my opinion at least, so you can take that for what it's worth, I would say that we are going to have we're going to end up at a point where Warding Insight definitely does get interrupted by Ark's Vision, and then you can go ahead and use the rest of Warding Insight to bottom the card that you would normally put on top of your deck before moving on with the rest of your turn. So I'm interested what people think in the comments section, but that's the way I look at Londriel's legacy, but it is really important to how she functions. So this is definitely the longest I've talked about a Seeker and their legacy, but pulling it all together, I think Londriel definitely plays that typical control style game. She really wants to make it so your opponent's not playing the game, which can be a little bit off-putting for some people, but you really get to pick like what things you want to happen and what things you don't want to have happen. And that's how we're going to kind of approach building this deck, is we're going to try and utilize as much of Warding Insight as we possibly can to prevent, cancel, or redirect effects that our opponent happens to engage in, to keep the units that we want protected, or stop the things from happening that our opponent's trying to do to disrupt our plans. Londriel's all about making certain that she gets her mastery in the way that she wants it, and you don't really get to disrupt her game at all. At least that's what we're aiming for. We'll start off the deck spell list, and first we've got 2 copies of Reversion being included here. This is a blue-white spell for Londriel and costs 3 echo. We can get 2 copies of this, which we're putting in here. It's a swift spell that states, as a spell is played, cancel it before resolving its effects. Instead of placing that spell into the discard pile, return it to its owner's hand at the end of the activation. So Reversion is going to help trigger Warding Insight by canceling a spell. Also, it really disrupts our opponent's tempo because they would be playing a spell to try and make something happen, but now they have to wait an extra turn for that something to occur again for them to be able to play that spell. And this is so disruptive because if that spell that they're trying to play is situational, like they've created a state on the table that they want to see execute with this like 1-2 punch kind of combination, countering the spell, or canceling the spell, I should say in Malediction's terms, canceling the spell and then returning it to their hand denies them the opportunity of that setup that they just invested in. So they might not be able to reinvest in that setup next turn, and you've just really spoiled their plans. So not only is this a highly disruptive spell that we have in the deck, but it's also going to really forward our game plan with being able to trigger that Warding Insight into being able to get extra spell or extra cards or extra echo. Next up, we have another blue-white spell, and that's going to be Resonant Guard. This is getting 2 copies in the deck. It costs 3 echo, is a swift spell that states, prevent up to X damage that would be dealt to an ally from a single source, where X is equal to the number of spell cards in your discard pile. You gain echo equal to that amount. So this card has like a million billion things going for it. It's fairly inexpensive at 3 echo, considering we should be getting some echo production from our legacy, but we're preventing damage, so that should trigger our legacy, and it's keeping our units alive, which denies our opponent mastery. And we also get to gain echo from it also. So this spell could easily replace itself and is just going to keep forwarding Londriel's plan of stop our opponent from doing what they want to and allowing us to continue playing the game we want. Next up, we have one of our blue bombs called Demanifest. This costs 6 echo for a channeled spell that states return a non-seeker unit and any of its equipped non-relic attachments to its owner's hand. It loses any equipped relic. So Demanifest is just a brutal spell. It costs a lot of echo, but again, we should be getting some echo production with the cards and our legacy that we have in this deck, and just being able to set your opponent's tempo back by bouncing something to their hand, something that was really expensive that they might not be able to play within the next turn. They might have to wait an additional turn to get some extra echo back, is pretty rough. But then also getting the equipment bounce back to their hand is brutal. But then on top of that, they just lose their equipped relics. So this is a way you can kind of swipe the game out from somebody by just like saying, "Oh, you dropped your relic," and you get it's still like I just tell you this card gives me nightmares. But with Londriel, it's you absolutely have to have this in there. It just makes her run. So it plays really well into her game plan and is such a powerful piece of tech. Next up, we have 2 copies of Neutralizing Ward. So for 3 Echo, we get a swift spell that simply states, as a channel is played, cancel it before resolving its effects. This card will trigger our legacy, and it will just straight up stop our opponent from doing something. Like, think about those unmakes, Thunderous Cataclysm, I think is what it is, that does 5 damage to everything in an area. Any big crazy spell like Endless Rage, anything that you don't want happening to either your stuff or don't want have happening to your opponent's stuff, it just gets thwarted immediately. And again, we're engaging with Londriel's legacy here and also forwarding our game plan. So Neutralizing Ward is absolutely going in the deck. Next up, we have another blue bomb, Runefold Ward. For 4 Echo, we get a swift spell that states, as a spell is played, cancel it before resolving its effect. So this looks a lot like Neutralizing Ward, but the big difference here is that Runefold Ward can cancel swift spells, whereas Neutralizing Ward can't do that. It can only cancel channel spells. So having 1 copy of this in here is nice, because swifts kind of, to me, feel like they have a disruptive nature to them, and Londriel doesn't like to be disrupted, so having one of these in your back pocket is absolutely necessary for making sure that your opponent doesn't pull the rug out from under you. I'm pulling in another big blue spell with Ambliss Transposition. This is a 4 Echo channeled spell that simply states, swap the position of 2 units that are within 10 inches of each other, ignoring obstacles. So I like the card for its power and not so much that it's forwarding a Londriel plan. If you maybe have collapsed an area on the table and need to try and get somewhere with more relevant pieces quicker, this could definitely do that. But really what I like to do with this is try to like abduct my opponent's model. So if they're trying to play keep away or something like that, I can go ahead and play Ambliss Transposition and pull one of their units into like my kill zone, and then I can start beating them up or steal a relic or steal that important mastery that I need to get if that certain unit is going to get me over the winning threshold. So Ambliss Transposition is a really fun card for this deck and lets you kind of react and manipulate the battlefield. Our next spell is the Shattered Throne Bomb, Shield of Androvos. This is a 4 Echo swift spell that states, prevent up to 10 damage that would be dealt to an ally from a single source. So this is another card that can go towards forwarding Londriel's legacy and battle plan to try and stop our opponents from doing things. 10 damage is a lot to prevent. It might even cancel out some criticals at certain points, but this should be triggering your legacy and keeps important pieces on the table. So it's disruptive and a denial piece as well. The next spell we're dropping in is more of a wiggle piece. We're getting 2 copies of Brewing Fate. This is a 2 Echo swift spell that states, after a player makes an attack roll, choose one. That attack has +3 accuracy, or that attack has -3 accuracy. I feel like there's some really innate power in this card of being able to stop your opponent from doing something. Now, this doesn't play into Londriel's legacy, even though functionally you're preventing an attack by saying, oh, you've hit by 3, I'm going to make that not hit because of this card. But I think with Londriel's, she's specifically looking for the words prevent, cancel, or redirect, and this doesn't do any of those. But in essence, it can stop your opponent from landing an attack against some of your more higher defense things, or ensure that an attack that you've decided to put out hits and does the damage it needs to do. Again, I feel like this is kind of more of a flex card where it's good when it's good, but other than that, it's not gonna be doing much for you. So I could see some people cutting it, but I find it to be a pretty neat card to include with her, and could be really frustrating when your opponent's like, oh yes, I barely hit, and you're like, no, thank you, you don't hit. the final slot for our spells is going to be 2 copies of Wards of Valkaris. And this is a swift spell that simply states prevent up to 5 damage that would be dealt to an ally from a single source. So this is mini Shield of Androvos, and 5 damage is either it's a good number of full hits in the game, and pretty much every graze that's unmodified that it can prevent. So this will again trigger Londriel's legacy, and it just stops our opponent from bashing into our units and getting that mastery. So it just forwards her game plan again of please don't do things to me while I do all the things to you. With all the spells out of the way, we can start to make sense of how I want to build this deck with the units in mind. And the first one is going to be 3 copies of Armored Revenant. This is a 5 Echo unit that has a 2 accuracy with a 4-2 damage split, 0 range, 5-inch movement, 12 defense, and 12 wounds. We get 2 fun abilities, the first being counterattack. Whenever a hit is scored against this unit, you may retaliate after the damage resolves. We also get cleave, that states whenever this unit defeats a nearby enemy with a melee attack, it may perform a free melee attack. So Armored Revenants are interesting in that, or with this deck specifically, if we're doing things like preventing damage, that doesn't matter for the Armored Revenant's counterattack. If we prevent or absorb the damage elsewhere, counterattack procs or triggers on a hit, and doesn't matter if the damage is dealt to us or not. Just once the damage is resolved, we get to make that counterattack. And with cleave, we should be getting a lot of small pot shots here and there to start whittling down our opponent's units, and cleave would be able to get some extra attacks out of that as well. I think the Armored Revenant with its defensive stats looks like a spicy thing to try and pick apart, but with all of the prevention and reduction that we have in this list, I think that it makes the Armored Revenant a really difficult choice for our opponent to attack, because we should be getting a lot of counterattacks out of this particular unit. Next, we're knocking out one of the big boys early, and that's going to be Rogarth the Breaker. This is a 9 Echo unit that has a 4 accuracy, a 6-2 damage split, 0 range, 8-inch movement, 14 defense, and 16 wounds. We get 3 really fun abilities on here. First being Dash. During this unit's activation, it can perform a free move. And then we also have Cleave again, where when he defeats a nearby enemy with a melee attack, he can perform a free melee attack. We also get Devastate 2, so if we're lucky enough to get any criticals, we deal an extra 2 damage on those, so that would give us 10 damage in one swing. I just really like the casino game of Rogarth with the damage, but also having Cleave on something that's got a 6 damage stat on just the hit is pretty potent when we've been taking little shots here and there with things like Armored Revenant and some of the other models, especially Londriel if she's been doing some repost hits. But being able to dash, Rogarth becomes a pretty good relic holder. He can go fetch it, and it doesn't really affect his activation at all. So I think Rogarth, for me, just has so much utility. And with having defense 14, that makes Brewing Fate interesting as well. I really like Rogarth as a harassing piece that can go do work when they need to. They're just so versatile. Next up, we've got 2 copies of True Stone Exemplar. This is a 7 Echo unit that has a 3 accuracy with a 4-2 damage track, no range, speed 5, again 14 defense, 16 on wounds, so really survivable. We have Ironclad 2, so this unit gets +2 defense against ranged attacks, bumping him up to 16. He also brings Shield Wall, so while other friendly allies are nearby, they get +1 defense. We also get Protection 2, so twice per activation this unit may absorb damage that would be dealt to a nearby ally. Damage exceeding this unit's health is dealt to the original target. So the True Stone Exemplar is functionally forwarding Londriel's plan, even though it's not doing the things the legacy is going to be demanding of us. But getting defense 16 against range is pretty big, but we have between 14 and it's like most of the units in the game are like this, but maybe it's just my perspective and what I play. Most units that I'm going to be bringing in this are going to be somewhere between 12 and 14, so getting those bumps to make that between 13 and 15 math is pretty good. Shield Wall is just really great, and then you can kind of just pick a area in the middle, get a True Stone Exemplar there, pull the damage off from your allies, things that might, like your Armored Revenant, protecting that so that you can trigger counterattack without taking any damage from it is pretty big, especially when that True Stone Exemplar's got a pretty hefty health pool to be able to deny that. You can do some funny, tricky things if you want to get cute with them. Since the damage that if you kill the True Stone Exemplar and there's more damage that needs to go back to the original target, you might get to a point where now you could play like Ward of Valkaris to prevent damage, to be able to trigger the legacy and do some other fun things. But I would say that the circumstance needs to be very specific in which you would want to save the model that was being attacked and not just try to save the True Stone. Next up is a unit that I'm always on the verge of cutting, as I'm sad to say, because it's a dual color unit that I really want to have in here. I want it to be good. But next up is 3 copies of Warden's Lancer. This is a 5 Echo unit that has 2 accuracy, 3/2 damage split, 0 range, 8-inch move, 13 defense, 10 wounds. We get the repost ability, so whenever a graze is scored against the unit, you can retaliate after the damage is resolved. Spell Strike 1 is the tough one for me here, because if you played a spell this activation, this unit gets +1 damage until the end of the activation. This is neat, but with the way that we have our deck set up, where every spell is pretty much reactive, there's very little in here that's proactive. You could definitely see like Brewing Fate being the card that triggers Spell Strike, but we won't be getting that very often, as if we were playing more active spells instead of reactive ones. Overall, repost is good. 13 defense is really nice with him. Getting the True Stone Exemplar around up to 14 means that we should be triggering the graze a little bit more often. And then at that point, then if we're like doing reactive stuff and our opponent's attacking the Lancer, then we get Spell Strike, but that's really corner case, and your opponent's got a lot of choice in whether that happens or not. So the Warden's Lancer, as much as I want to like it, it's very much on the verge of coming out of the deck, but maybe your experiences with them are different, especially if you're playing a deck that, again, has more active spells instead of reactive ones. The next unit I'm bringing in is a powerhouse, and that's going to be the Gateway Guardian. This is a 9 Echo unit that has accuracy 3, a 5/3 damage split, 0 range, 5-inch move, 15 defense, and 16 wounds. That means that this thing's going up to defense 16 with a True Stone Exemplar hanging around them. But it gets better. They have 3 cool abilities. The first one being Resistance 1. Whenever this unit's dealt damage, it suffers 1 fewer damage. And then Spell Immunity, so no spells can affect this unit, or you can just ignore them. I guess you may ignore them, so if you wanted it to happen, it could. But next we have Protection 2, so twice per activation, this unit may absorb damage that would be dealt to a nearby ally. Damage exceeding the unit's health is dealt to the original target. So the Gateway Guardian is another kind of, plays that True Stone Exemplar route, but it can also just bury itself into our opponent's units, and it becomes very difficult to shift, especially if you get that True Stone around to bump it up to defense 16. This thing's very difficult to hit, and the 5/3 damage on it is quite threatening. With Brewing Fate, you can make it so that it's got that the 3 extra accuracy that comes along with it. I just feel like the Gateway Guardian really plays well with what Londriel wants to do. It's just another anchor to sit somewhere and be a real annoyance to deal with. He can easily hold a relic and be very difficult to remove. The next unit we have up is a single inclusion of the Spellbound Gargoyle. For 3 Echo, we get a 1 accuracy unit with a 3/1 damage split, 0 range, 8-inch move, 12 defense, and 8 wounds. We get the flying ability, so while moving, the unit can pass over any obstacle, and then nimble, so they can move without provoking retaliation. Now, the reason why there's a 1-of in this deck is that it was kind of a filler, but I also wanted just an extra unit that had the mobility and maneuverability to get around the table and pick up any kind of like straggler relics. And I think that the Spellbound Gargoyle fills that role pretty well. If that's not something that you find using, this is an easy bluff out for like taking initiative bids. But I think that just having one of these in here means that I don't want to see it early. because I don't want to just watch it die, because it's probably the easier thing to kill in this list. But just being able to get it when I want it in the late game makes it work for me. So it's a one of just as a tech pick. The next unit is going to be 2 copies of Warfront Commander. For 6 Echo, we get a 2 accuracy unit with a 4-2 split, 0 range, 6 move, 13 defense, and 12 wounds. We get 2 abilities on this unit, the first one being Battle Cry for 1 AP. An ally you own of this unit's rank or lower and within 6 inches performs an attack or a move once for each ally per activation. We also get Inspire 2. While other allies are within 6, they get +2 accuracy. So a lot of our units kind of sit around this like 3 accuracy. Taking this up to 5 is really important to make sure that every hit that we're taking counts, especially when you do things like get the counterattacks from Revenants or get some cleaves going on here and there. And the Battle Cry is really nice on this particular unit as well. Like he can slap a little bit. He's only got 2 accuracy, but the 4-2 damage is nice. So I really would prefer to be using the Warfront Commander as just like a Inspire block, and then being able to call Battle Cries multiple times, especially if we can do things like Battle Cry something, and then Battle Cry again with an Armored Revenant, and then get the Cleave to proc during that extra attack. So we can take a lot of extra attacks that aren't during activations of the model that's making them, I guess. And the Warfront Commander just seems like a really nice fit for this one, considering we have enough units that are his rank or lower that can get value from being Battle Cried often, especially since we can make the move from Battle Cry. It can also just get things into places where our opponent might not have thought they could get to. The final unit we're bringing along is going to be a Spellbound Devourer. For 8 Echo, we get a 4 accuracy, 4-2 damage split, 4-inch range, 5-inch movement, 13 defense, 16 wounds unit with 3 separate abilities. The first one being Melee Expert, 2. This unit gets +2 damage on melee attacks, so that takes him to a 6-4 on melee. And then has Essence Binder 3. Whenever an enemy is defeated during this unit's activation, you gain 3 Echo, and we finally get Pull 4. Whenever this unit scores a ranged hit, you may pull the defender up to 4 inches. So the Spellbound Devourer is kind of a bully. He has that good 13 defense that can go up to 14 with Shield Wall. 16 wounds is a bit to clip through, and you really can't escape it that much. If you're just outside of the 4, if you're in the 4 inches, then he'll just pull you in and start beating on you. Essence Binder is nice on a unit that has such a good damage track. If your opponent's unfortunate enough to be in combat with this thing at the start of its activation, it's not unlikely that it could do 12 damage and then Essence Binder to get the 3 Echo back, which just kind of fuels our engine again. So the Spellbound Devourer just is such a bully, and I think that's the second time I've said this, but he is just a monstrosity, an abomination, some would say. And I think that it's, with all of the denial that we have, it's going to be really difficult for your opponent to land the things on this that they need to in order to deal with it. We have plenty of ways to shunt damage off of it if somebody's starting to do work on it. So if you've got a True Stone Exemplar by or something, and it just becomes really difficult for your opponent to interact with this piece when it can really own an area for a good long while. The final piece in this deck is going to be 2 copies of Great Shield. This is a 1 Echo attachment that states the unit gets +1 defense and gains Shield Wall 1, while other allies are nearby, they get +1 defense. If this unit already had Shield Wall, you increase it by 1 instead. So we have 1 Shield Wall unit with a True Stone Exemplar, so that could bump their Shield Wall up to 2. And with their 14 defense, they'd go up to 15 with the Great Shield on them, so they become even more difficult if you're trying to use them a little more aggressively. Or we can take some of our other units that already have decent defense on their own and bump them up, or get those 13s up to 14s and create that bubble of Shield Wall. So really, the Great Shield is trying to forward the protective element of this deck, where it's please don't hurt my stuff and don't do anything to damage my things. And you could definitely switch this out for something like a Horned Helm if you're wanting to do more damage and control the board a little bit more. But for me, I really like the idea of I mean, I don't like the idea of my opponent not being able to do the things they want to, like failing all the attacks that they take, having all the spells that they cast canceled, and not being able to affect some of my units by their spells, and always getting hit for hitting me. That's like, it's not my priority of like, this is how I want to play the game, because I think this style of deck could be very frustrating for someone to play against. But when it comes to forwarding the spirit of what I'm theming this deck around, I think that the Great Shield just fits well for me. I do like being, I like being more of a defensive player than an offensive one, so this one helps me grind that out a little bit. A card that I wanted to talk about before we wrap up is going to be Shifting Winds. This is currently, from what I can recollect, the only spell in Malediction that redirects attacks, and it's interesting because Londriel's Legacy specifically calls out redirecting as something that can proc her legacy, and I don't have this in the main deck. I would definitely make it into a side deck, but I don't usually play with those because I'm usually playing a deck to test an idea that I have, not to try and test whether I can win the game or not, which sounds weird, but that's just how I engage with the game. So side decks are not something that I typically aim for, but if you do, this is definitely something that could go in there. The stipulation of having to target something else within 6 inches makes me feel like this kind of is usually going to be targeting something else of your list, or one of your units instead of your opponent's, unless you're kind of balled up in the middle, but still worth it if they have a lot of ranged capabilities. But for me, I prefer to just leave it out of the main deck in case I don't run against range. Then it just feels like a dead card in my hand. So this is the deck list as it stands. We're split pretty well with 14 spells, 14 units, a couple attachments, and there's definitely wiggle room in here if there's a certain blue unit that you really, really enjoy, because you can tell that I definitely am more pitched towards the white side when it comes to units. And, you know, whether you're a shield person or not, you can easily take those out. But this deck, for me, as the player, seems fun because I'm getting to the denial game. If I'm playing the denial game right, it means that I'm doing what my deck wants to do and having fun doing what I'm doing. But control decks in general have always been kind of contentious in terms of whether people find them enjoyable or not. At least you can take it to heart that Malediction games go pretty fast. So it's not like you're ramping up for a whole week to go play this game of Malediction with your opponent to sit there for 4 hours and waste half your weekend doing something like this. Usually you can get past it pretty quick, and this version of Control, I feel like, engages the game enough to where you feel like your opponents can have some interactivity. It's not like we're countering everything they play or preventing every piece of damage that they throw at us, but I definitely can see if your opponent hasn't played against Londriel in some way, shape, or form before getting to sit down, I could see where they might get salty about it. But it's all about just being really transparent with your opponent about what your deck does, what kind of things you have in it, handing them your deck to take a look at it even. But I will leave a link to this deck list in the description, or the link to the Malediction Play Network. And if you wanted to mess around with it, you're more than welcome to. And of course you are. You can do what you want. But otherwise, thanks for making it to the end of this video. I feel like Londriel had a lot to talk about, and we will look forward to making the next one.